Hello and welcome back to the Tin Barn. I'm Pragmatic Lee, and in today's video we're going to do something again a little bit different. I realize most of my videos deal with tool making and items around the shop, but today we're going to get a little artsy and make a couple of inkwells, or imitation inkwells, if you will. Here's one that I made from a piece of round stock. It's just an ornamental piece, but today I want to make a couple out of some square stock. And I've got a piece about 4 inches long here, just a little over 4 inches long, that is from, if you follow my videos from way back, I had about a 4-foot piece of this. It was an old wagon axle, 2 inch by 2 inch, heavily pitted, rust pits in it. But this is about the last piece. I got one more piece, I don't know, about 3 inches that has a hole in it that I'll find a use for one day. But I think this is probably going to be the last piece to make something of a practical use, if you will, even though it's going to be an ornamental pieces. So what I want to do first, before we get this on the lathe, is turn it around, or turn around over to the mill and try to mill out some of these roughest pits in here. Get it reasonably square and get the ends reasonably square to it. What's going to be a little bit different about this, and if you'll stick with me through this video, even though it's an ornamental piece, kind of an artsy piece, there will be a lot of machining involved on this. What you don't see a lot is putting a convex surface on a square piece. You see it quite often on round pieces, but we're going to actually put a convex surface on this round piece in the lathe. So let's get turned around to the mill and get it cleaned up a little bit. I have the workpiece in the mill now. I've got a 1/2 inch rough and end mill mounted, and got my coolant set up, I think about ready. This is the worst pitted site, so we're going to try to go ahead and take that down to a clean surface. I'm expecting this to wind up, this originally started out at 2 inch. I'm expecting it to wind up at about 1.8 probably. So we'll touch off here, set 0 on the Z-axis. I'm going to start out taking about 50 thousandths to begin with. See how that does on the cutter and all the working pieces. Get the coolant primed up and get it going. The worst pits are right in the center here and at this end. So that'll give us an indication of just how far down we need to go. All right, I'm going to continue this cleanup process on the 4 sides to where I've got them cleaned up, and then I'll bring you back when we get ready to start squaring up the ends and maybe even squaring up the overall dimensions. All 4 sides of our pieces now do have a clean surface on them. Got just, of course, got some markings from the end mills. But now what I want to do is try to square off this saw cut on the end. I will be able to face it in the lathe when I get it in there, but 99% of this end right here is going to go away. The only thing that'll be left is this part of the neck. So I'm just wanting to now just to get it close enough that I can get a center mark on it. And that's going to be a little bit past halfway. We'll come over here, and I realize a rough and end mill is not going to lead the best finish on that end. But as I said earlier, all I'm going to do is clean it up now enough to get a center mark on it. And the bandsaw this was cut on evidently has just a few degrees off of square. I'm simply going to flip it over. All right, I think that's perfectly fine to get a center mark. I'm going to turn it around, do the same thing to the other end. Then we'll go back to the workbench and get this piece laid out. All right, all four sides are cleaned up. The ends are squared off, faced off. I said originally I expected this to come out to about 1.8. 1.862 on that side, 1.835. And as I said earlier, I'm not really concerned about this being exactly square. This is trying to emulate a 17th century hand-blown inkwell, so I'm certain it wouldn't have been perfectly square. But the corners should have been square, and that's what we were doing here on the mill, cleaning up. So we'll start with this side, 1.835. 0.9175. There's 917. All right, so we got a mark from both directions. .867. 0.934. All right, now we got a center mark. I'll take my center punch, get this where I can see it good. I'll be back in the frame in just a second. All right, so what I did was put a center punch right on where those two lines crossed. All right, I'm going to do the same thing on the other end, and then I'll meet you over on the lathe. All right, I'm over at the lathe now, and it seems like about the only way I can get you in a position where you can really see what I'm doing is an overhead shot again. But I've got the 4-jaw chuck in now, and I've got my jaws close by. I'm just going to snug them up. And of course we could put an indicator on as such. and try to indicate off of these flat surfaces. But if you recall, I put a center. I marked the center in here. So what we're going to do is put our dead center in that hole, pull our tailstock up to it, tighten it up, and then we can use this round surface right here, which will be a whole lot easier to indicate on. Get our height about the center of that dead center. And just get us a starting point, get some preload on. And as always, we want to find our high spot. And again, all I'm doing is looking for the high spot and moving it in. We got down to less than a full swing on here, so that'll make it a little easier now. These two seem to be our highs. I'll back these two off just a little, and then tighten the highs. All right, we're within 2/1000ths now. Let's see if I can get that out. And there comes a point, at least for me, of diminishing returns. I probably should have stopped at being within 2/1000ths because I've overshot it then. All right, that's within 1.5, maybe 2/1000ths. I think that is plenty close enough to try to replicate a 17th century inkwell. I'm going to take the dead center out, but for stability purposes, I am going to go ahead and put the pull the live center up. And I know from my prototype I made that I want to make this neck about 825 thousandths. So I'm just going to bring my carriage stop up. All right. Now all I'm going to do is take this down to round to begin with, and then we'll start looking for our dimension. All right, I'll bring you back when I about got this rounded off. All right, I got this end surface now down to a round. We want this 1 inch. It's 1.781 now, so we got about 781 thousandths to go. I'm gonna put a little coolant on it now. All right, I'm going to continue to take that down about 60 thousandths at the time until we get down to 1 inch, and then I'll bring you back for the next step. All right, let's get a measurement now. We should be within about 68 70 thousandths. $63 thousandths, okay. 20, 40, 60. That should be close enough. This last cut, I'll put a little heavy cutting oil on instead of the coolant. Even though most of this is going to be turned away as well. All right, for now, I'm just going to get that coolant hose out of the way. Put my parting tool in. I'll zero out the Z-axis, and I'm going to come in 200 thousandths. And I'm going to lock the carriage down up there. I'm going to get the carriage stop out of the way. I just want to touch off. Now I'm going to zero out the X-axis. I need to slow way down here. Alright, what I did was go in 200 thousandths on the DRO, which took 400 thousandths off the diameter. Alright, now I'm going to move as close up here as I can get. I'm just watching the DRO to 200 thousandths. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is just manually go in there, or at each point, lock my carriage down and clean up in between. I'm putting very light pressure on this parting tool since I'm pushing on the sides, but all I'm doing is cleaning up that undercut. Alright, that's got that cleaned up pretty good. We'll put a piece of emery cloth on it in just a second. First, I'm going to put a little chamfer on each side of the lip on the neck. Now I'm going to back the tailstock and the carriage out of the way, get a piece of emery cloth and just clean up. Alright, before we start putting that convex surface on there, I'm going to go ahead and drill out for the quill, the hole for the quill to set in. And I think that should be a good enough center in there that the drill won't try to wander. We'll see. If it does, we'll come back and put the center drill in first. Now it's off camera, but I'm sure if you watched my previous videos, you've seen the DRO I've got on the tailstock. This piece of material is about 4 1/4. Each one of them is going to be just a little over 2 inches. So I want to go in about 1.75, just close. So I'm going to use my scale to zero out. Again, that's a close enough zero. All right, now I'm coming in with the 2 inch, with the 1/2 inch drill. Slow down a little bit. I'm comfortable, my tailstock is seated now, so again, I'll zero out the DRO and come in 1 3/4 inches. All right, now we're going to get set up to put a dome, if you will, on the top of our inkwell, or a convex surface. And to do that, I've showed you in a previous video how a method of setting your DRO up using the square of your compound and your quick change tool post. For this, I'm going to use another method that will be plenty close enough for what I'm wanting to try to duplicate here, or replicate. All right, through trial and error on the prototype that I made, the prototype square one and the prototype round one, I've determined that a 15-degree angle, 15 degrees past 90, was visually acceptable, if you will. So the means I'm going to use this time to set the compound, again, I had everything kind of tightened down here. Let me loosen up just a little. Okay. It's simply putting the protractor against the work. Actually, it's kind of easier to hold it against the compound. And that is plenty close enough for what I'm doing here. So the compound is set at our 15 degrees, plus or minus a degree or two. And I also found, this is the kind of thing you just have to kind of trial and error to find the right tool that will fit into what you're wanting to do. I got to be very careful I don't get this too far underneath. Tell you what, I'll bring you back in just a minute when I get all this set up to where nothing's going to hit the chuck. Okay, I think I've got it set up now. That's going to get all the angle on here of the dome. This is really no different than cutting any kind of angle with the compound, except for the fact that we're doing it on a piece of square stock, which will give it more of an appearance of a dome than it will an angle. I think you'll see as I go through this. Now, normally when you're cutting an angle, it's a combination of the compound and the cross slide, normally with the carriage locked down in place. With a steeper angle as I've got here, I'm actually going to advance the carriage a little bit as well. And that's what I wanted to be sure down here to set this carriage stop so that I couldn't move this far enough in to crash the cross slide with the chuck. So I think I got a decent setup here. And I'm going to pull this out about to the point and just gradually move that in until I'm touching. Then I'll use the compound. Sorry, I said the compound, I meant the carriage. Now, don't want to get much at the time now. It's very easy to move your carriage a lot at the time. And this actually cuts a little easier to pull them all from the inside out. All right, we'll stop for a moment and look at what we're getting. I think you can see, looking down on that now, we're getting the appearance of a dome. And we're going to keep taking this until we bottom this point out in there, where the neck reaches the base of our inkwell. Just double checking to be sure that insert wasn't chipped. All right, I think this is going to be our last pass here. So I'm going to take it real slow coming out, try not to leave any tracks. We'll make one more pass with a much lighter cut and see if I can't get a little bit smoother surface there. See what, that right there might have done it, just coming in. Get everything out of the way now. And I'm going to take my piece of emery cloth again. These flats are going to get surface ground, but for now I just want to get that burr out of the way, because what I'm fixing to do is turn this piece around and repeat this entire process that I did on this end, going to repeat it on the other end. So I'll bring you back when I get that done. It's going to be doing the exact same things, getting it centered up in the forejaw, cutting our surface down to the 1 inch, then our insert, then our drill, and cutting the dome. So I'll bring you back when we get ready to part the two inkwells. All right, I got both necks of our two inkwells machined out. Got our dome on each end. I've carried it back to the bench and marked the center of the piece. So now we're going to put it in the bandsaw and separate these two pieces, these two inkwells. Okay, just like I did on the original ends, after I saw this in two, I put a center on the saw cut side of it. I've got one of the pieces in here now, and again, just like I did before, used the dead center in there and got it centered up. Now what we're going to do is face this end flat. I know my saw cut was not straight. I had very little to hold on, as a matter of fact. But we're gonna flatten that, and then we're gonna put a recess in there for one of my 10 born time decals. I've been told I need to start marking my items that I give away, sell, whatever. So we're gonna put a little recess in there for a decal. Okay, I realize it's hard for you to see with the camera position right now, but I've got all the saw cut cleaned up. And before I milled away or faced away that center dot that I had in there, I marked 0 on my DRO. So I'm at 0 now, and I'm going to advance in not with that insert, because I just chipped that insert. I'll be right back. Okay, as I was saying, what I'm going to do now is back off of that 0 that I set. I'm going to back off 500 thousandths. I'm just going to try to ease into it just a little bit. And all this is doing is giving a recess for the decal to go into. All right, my little 10 born time decals are, I think, just a little less than an inch. Well, they're dead on an inch. I got plenty of room milled out in there, or faced out. So I'm going to put the other one in, do the same thing to that. Then we'll go over to the surface grinder and start putting a final finish on this. Okay, I'm at the surface grinder now, and I'm going to put these, both of them down at one time. And I'm going to put where I put the dicing on there with the saw. I know those two sides were together. So I'll put them in place. And just for some extra added holding, I'm going to put these magnetic transfer blocks on each side. Okay. Now I'm doing these as a pair, not so much so that they're both the same size, but just so that I can do two in one setup. My plan is to just surface grind these just enough to remove the that roughing end mill, the marks from that. I'm dropping down about 2 thousandths at a time. So I'm sure you all know a roughing end mill leaves some kind of deep grooves in there, but we're cleaning them up. All right, that removed all the end mill marks. I'll go 1 thousandths now and only do a quarter step over at a time. And we're going to turn those two ground surfaces down. We won't advance any yet. We'll just be sure there's no burrs or high spots. All right, it's got all of our marks cleared up. Well, I'll take 1 thousandths. All right, I also put some black marker on the opposing two sides that were together. So those should line up now. And just like before, we're going to get these two sides and we'll flip over and get the other two. I'll look for any high spots first. All right, now we're getting ready to do the top and bottom. We'll do those separately because the saw cut was, you know, maybe a few thousandths long on one side, short on the other. That makes absolutely no difference. These are not going to be sold as a pair or not going to be kept as a pair. So all we want to do on this is just surface grind that top to get rid of. You remember this? These were originally the end, and we faced that off in the mill using that roughing end mill. So we want to get that a little cleaner, or a lot cleaner than what it actually is. Alright, so we have a nice flat top. Our four sides are surface ground now. We got one more step we're going to do to each one. Here on the surface grinder. And that is, we're going to get rid of these sharp edges right here. So we'll put that in. It's amazing how you can feel the smallest little piece of grit after you've done a surface grind. And I'm going to take one of these transfer blocks and put over here at the end, just as a bumper block. I have to get my wiping rag hung up in my auto feed here. All right, so that's touched off up here on side of camera, but I'm going to set the set a 0 on my down feed, and we're going to come down 45 thousandths. Not all at one time, of course. All right, so there's 45,000. Now I'm just going to work the wheel to both sides, just to be sure I'm wearing my wheel the same. Now I'm going to flip it over 180 degrees. And the 0 we had should be very close, but I'm going to back off another 5 thousandths. Find that 0. The only reason it wouldn't be the same is that there's a little grain or a little chip or just a little something in that V block. Yep, and that's the original 0. Just don't like to reach in there with my fingers with that thing spinning. All right, I'm going to bring the dial back to, there's the 0, and I'll give an extra 5 thousandths again, just to be sure there's nothing got it pushed up. And there was the 0. I'm advancing around 2 thousandths per stroke. Deeper it gets, as it gets deeper, I'll drop down to about 1 thousandth. There's 25. There's 40. And there's 45. So we've got a nice little 45 on each of these 4 corners. All right, I'm going to do the same thing to the top of this one and the 4 corners. Then we'll meet back over on the workbench and conclude this project. Okay, I think I might have said we'll come back to the workbench and wind this project up. Several more things I'm going to do on this project, but I think I'm pretty much complete on the Inkwells. I still haven't decided if I want to heat blue these. I did a heat blue on a couple of other ones. This was the prototype, and this is the way my sticker will be under the bottom of these. where we milled out that little recess. But I'm undecided if I want to heat blue these or if I want to get some cobalt blue powder coating and try to match an ink color or a cobalt blue as much as possible. I'll think about that some more, but for now I think we're going to call this portion of the project completed. As Mr. Pete says, I doubt any of you in the world will ever want to do this, but I think you, or hopefully you got a little bit out of the techniques to put this dome on and also to relieve these corners on the surface grinder. So take care, and we'll see you on the next project.